Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy.
So what you got for us today, Claire?
That's not what you're supposed to say.
What?
You're supposed to ask where we're headed.
I never asked that.
Yes, you do, because then I give you things to guess where we're headed.
No, go back and listen to any of our cases, ma'am. I always ask you, what do you got for us today? I ask what I want.
I'll wait. Fine, go again.
What do you got for us today, Claire?
Take 3.
What do you got for us today, Claire?
So we're headed to a place that has the most thunderstorms in the country.
Washington.
It has a wild monkey population. There's no personal income tax.
Florida.
I'm going to give you my other 2 ones because I didn't think you'd guess based on that, because there are other states that have no income tax.
Are there really?
Yes.
I only know Florida because I used to live down there for a few years.
Well, my other one was, it's a place where people have been arrested for throwing alligators through drive-through windows.
All right.
I didn't know that has occurred enough for it to be plural, but then it also has the highest percentage of people over 65, and I figure that one was a shoo-in.
Yeah.
But we are, in fact, headed to Florida, so way to go.
Woohoo! I'm a good guesser today. Look out. You know what? That means I'm going to be off on everything else.
I'm hoping so. You'll see why.
Oh, God, I'm scared.
So we're headed to Florida in 2015. Now, I'm going to introduce you, firstly, to Dr. Teresa Sievers.
Sievers is in, like, growing pains, the Sievers.
I vaguely remember growing pains, but I don't know if it's the same Sievers.
Well, it's obviously not the same Sievers.
Well, I don't know if it's spelled the same. When I was watching it, I didn't know how to spell. And now that I know how to spell, I don't know.
All right.
Anyway, she's a 46-year-old, high-profile doctor who practices holistic medicine, which you know I'm okay with.
Mm-hmm.
But she's going to cause her staff to be concerned when she doesn't show up for work on Monday, June 29th, 2015.
She's dead.
And she's not somebody who doesn't show up or is ever even late.
She's dead.
So they do the normal thing and call, but no answer. Now, we'll put a pin in that and tell you a little bit about Dr. Sievers. She's married to Mark Sievers. They've been married since 2003. They've been living in Florida since 2006, when they moved there to open their holistic medical practice. Now, their practice was pretty cool. They mixed traditional and alternative medicines, and now obviously she's the doctor, and her husband was the office manager so that he could support her mission. Now, Dr. Sievers even had her own YouTube health channel, and it seemed to be that they were really focused on doing great things together, like kind of a power couple. I did like one of the things she'd say in one of her videos, saying, "Getting you healthy is my passion. Being healthy is your choice."
That's very true.
It was impactful, because I can't tell you the amount of times I've heard like people go to the doctor but then not follow whatever was told for them to do.
My husband.
Well, it's just one of those. It's up to you. I can only give you recommendations. It's up to you if you're going to follow through on it. But I also like that idea of mixing medical approaches.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Well, because I think everybody's different, so it would make sense to mix and match things that would be the most effective treatment.
Yeah.
Now, by 2015, they're going to have 2 daughters together, and by the time frame we're talking, they're 11 and 8. Now, Mark is going to be the primary caretaker so that Teresa could do her doctoring.
Okay. If he's not the one that kills her, he's a great man, because there's not very many men that I have met that are okay taking a backseat to their wife and do the child care.
And being the secretary.
Well, that would be the backseat.
Not all secretaries are in the back seat.
You get what I mean, though.
Now, the whole Seaver family, they're going to go on a family vacation to New York. But Teresa, since they have their medical practice, she's going to head back home before Mark and the kids so that she could be at work on Monday and they can still enjoy New York. Now, Mark is going to drive Teresa to the airport on the 28th. Now, she's going to get on that flight. She's going to fly home. She even gives him a call to let him know when she makes it home. So when the people at the clinic call Mark and are like, yeah, she didn't show up, Mark's going to be real worried because he knows she got off the plane fine. What the fuck happened? And he's also in New York, so he can't just drive home. So he's going to call up his neighbor, who's also a fellow doctor, and be like, hey, can you go check on Teresa? She's not answering. She's supposed to be at work. I'm in New York.
You did another one of somebody sends their husband.
I'm driving this point home of do not go and check. Don't poke your head in.
Which means he did it.
So the neighbor is like, yeah, sure. I'll go check on her. No problem. So he's going to go to the Sievers house and he's going to
He's scarred for life.
And find Teresa laying on the floor in a pool of blood with a bloodied hammer next to her body.
Oh.
She was cold to the touch, and even though it's not like he could tell, it's later going to be determined she was hit in the head 17 times with that hammer.
That's pretty disgusting.
Yes. Now, naturally, the neighbor's going to call 911 immediately and tell the dispatch that he was asked to check on his friend's wife and found her dead on the floor with a hammer at her side.
Did he say it was suicide? Sorry.
No. So the police will take a look at the crime scene. Not that you shouldn't have known that one. As they're looking into it, it seems pretty weird. Now, it does look like Dr. Sievers was pretty much killed as soon as she entered the kitchen, but the family had an alarm system and it hadn't been set, and there were signs of forced entry. The side door of the home looked like it had been pried open.
But somebody knew the alarm code? That doesn't make sense.
And also, her purse was rifled through and in the kitchen. So was her luggage, but it was laying in the garage, which was left open. So it appeared that she got home, walked inside, laid her purse down, and then was killed. Now, as much as they tried, they couldn't find fingerprints or DNA. So before you get ahead of yourself with the alarm code, with the Sievers going on vacation, Mark had asked his mom to poke her head in and watch the pets.
No
matter how he tried to explain it, she couldn't figure out the alarm system, and I guess while they were gone, she was frequently doing the whole, this isn't working, I can't get it to arm. And she says that she thinks it's glitching because it won't arm, or it does arm, and like it's a whole thing. So I feel like part of it was because if you don't have an alarm system, it can be confusing or you forget to. So he's just going to be like, set it, don't set it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to enjoy their vacation. I don't think that's weird. So that was part of the reason why the alarm wasn't armed when somebody forced their way into the house. Now, when Mark is made aware that his wife had been killed, he's beside himself. His wife was loved by the community. It just didn't make sense to him that she could be killed, and in such a brutal way. His sister-in-law, Connie, would say that he couldn't speak after he heard the news. Like, he was just so tore up. And I really can't imagine finding out your spouse is killed, and especially beaten to death with a hammer.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
Yeah, because it's not like she accidentally died. She wasn't in a car accident. The plane didn't crash. She was bludgeoned with a hammer. It's a whole lot of rage.
I'd be a bad cop because I'm still sitting here looking at the husband.
So, well, not only that, but they had $40,000 in cash and it wasn't taken. And Mark had like a real extensive gun collection. They could have used that. Why the hammer? Why beat somebody to death with a hammer?
Did she have a boyfriend? I don't know why you're laughing. I'm asking a serious question.
So where Teresa was loved by a lot of people, she was kind of known for being a little bit of a spitfire, despite her being under 5 foot tall. She would yell at patients and staff because she expected for perfection from both. And I kind of feel like it was like one of those, she's trying to attain this great alternative practice, and everybody else is interfering with this being success. Not saying the business wasn't successful, but like, I kind of feel like some patients need the little bit of slap in the face kind of thing. Not for real, but what you're doing is not good for you.
Yeah.
But that didn't dissuade police from looking at Mark as the first potential suspect. Mark would willingly talk to investigators without a lawyer and even hand over his cell phone because he wants to find his wife's killer. He was worried for how long he had no answers. Were him and his daughters safe? would somebody come back? So he's going to start making sure he has a firearm with him all the time because, somebody came at his wife with a hammer.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the investigation is going to determine Mark couldn't have done it because he's got an airtight alibi of he was in New York. So they're going to ask him the usual of, who do you think could have done it? So they're going to ask him, is there any cheating going on? And initially, Mark's going to be like, no. But then he's going to go back and be like, well, we had an open marriage, so it wasn't cheating. And I feel like because he had forked over his phone and they found pictures and videos of other women he had been intimate with is what led to that confession. I don't know.
Yeah, he was forced into telling the truth.
But he would claim that they were swingers. So he was just like, most people don't get that. So I didn't want to mention that because we were both fine with it.
When he says they're swingers, did she know that they were swingers?
I don't know. They don't say whether or not they found stuff on her phone. That's what kind of made me do a little suspiciousness of, I think he wasn't thrilled at being the second, or not the head of the household, rather. So I think he was stepping out because he wasn't getting enough attention.
Yeah, he needed to feel manly.
Yeah, because playing Miss Doubtfire was taking a toll, and he was throwing his pecker everywhere.
Well, that's why I'm asking if...
It was a singular swing. And I feel like, the scene here of detectives going in and out of the interrogation room to see how people behave and
Yeah.
Now, during the conversation, Mark would go back and forth from tears to even hitting himself in the face. And when detectives aren't in the room, he would be talking to Teresa and question what he could have done. He could have saved her life if he was there. And for detectives, they were kind of doing the whole, this seems a little late on.
He's putting on a show.
Yeah, that's the vibe they're getting, because it's just like, there's grieving and being upset, and then he seems to be trying real hard to be convincing.
Like he knows there's cameras watching.
Mm-hmm. Now, around the time that Dr. Sievers is killed, there were other suspicious deaths of alternative doctors in the United States. By the way, I don't remember hearing anything about that.
Yeah, you just made me sit here like, what?
Well, so Mark is like, I'm thinking there might be a connection. Not only that, Teresa was just featured in a local women's magazine about her greatness and her mission and just the idea of mixing medical approaches. And I feel like also because she's a female business owner is another like local yay.
Right.
But investigators are like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's likely because there was a whole lot of rage. People don't just decide to beat people in the head with a hammer without some sort of a reason for the rage. So that investigation's still going to be going on. And then it'll be Teresa's funeral. And Mark would say, I was and still am the luckiest man in the world.
What?
Which I'm going to say is a weird-ass thing to say.
His wife is dead.
Well, I did some blinking because I get not everybody's good with their words. But it seems real alarming at your wife's funeral to say that you're the luckiest man in the world.
Yeah, you're not so lucky with them words, feller.
So I was like, and I can tell you whether he did it or didn't do it or any of that. But at this point, I was like, if he didn't do it...
Yeah, like it's bad enough. If I was an officer, I'd already be looking real hard at him as he done did it or had his hand in it in some way, shape, or form. But make a comment like that?
I pictured detectives doing darty-eyed looks at each other like, did he just say that?
Because they probably did.
Yeah. Now, in a full investigation, obviously they can't just go for the spouse. They've got to be open to any other possibilities and run down any other suspects. So that's going to include, obviously, anyone's close to her patients, her staff, family members, friends. And then they find out there was also an employee who resigned the very day Dr. Sievers was killed. Which, talk about bad luck if you quit and your boss is dead and you didn't do it.
Yeah.
But she would be cleared later on during the investigation. But seriously, that would suck. So then after a few weeks of the investigation and nothing going on with it, a lead is going to come in from Illinois, which is real weird.
Mm-hmm. Is that where the person that just quit went to?
So it's from a woman named Rose. Now, Rose would say she was visiting a friend's house and that friend's daughter was recently married and her husband had been in Florida for the weekend for an IT emergency. Only he left his cell phone at home and was unable to be reached all weekend. Now, she didn't think anything of it before until she finds out that her new hubby, the friend's daughter's husband, if you're following that connection, was married to Mark's childhood friend, Curtis Wainwright. Now, Mark was also the best man at Curtis's wedding just 2 months before Teresa's murder. Not only that, but Teresa was murdered the very weekend Curtis was in Florida. Mind you, he would travel every now and then to Florida because with them being friends and him being a tech guy, he didn't mind coming down to visit his pal and then work on their computers. So, naturally, they're going to want to talk to Curtis. And Curtis would claim he wasn't in Florida. He was in Missouri all weekend.
What?
Yeah, which couldn't be proven since no one saw him. They couldn't validate any sort of alibi. But beyond that, he wasn't willing to talk. So detectives are going to be like, all right, he had rented a rental car that weekend. So they're going to track down that rental car. And I guess he doesn't remember that there's GPS because they're going to track down that very car he rented and pull up the GPS and find that this sumbitch not only rented a car, but he drove to Florida.
Oh, all right.
But he didn't just drive to Florida. He drove straight to his friend's house.
Of course. And that just happens to be the day that she died.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh.
But weirdly, the GPS had been paired with an email address that wasn't Curtis's, but a friend of his, Jimmy Ray Rogers. And mind you, all during the trip, it'll show where he's getting gas, where he's stopping, all that. So they're going to pull up store surveillance and see that Curtis isn't alone. Jimmy tagged along with him.
Oh.
Which makes more sense because his friend's in there. He paired his phone with the GPS because then that way they weren't just driving all over the United States trying to find their way to Florida.
Go southeast.
Now, fortunately, they were able to take the car GPS as well as Jimmy's cell phone records and pull up surveillance footage from a gas station to prove that both men were traveling together and also that they arrived at the Sievers house together. Now, side note, Curtis and Jimmy had actually met in jail.
Whoa.
Curtis was doing time in 2011 for drug charges and Jimmy was in there for petty larceny. So that's when they hit it off, and that's what that starts their friendship. I wasn't sure if you were trying to figure out how two people who are supposed to be law-abiding citizens would suddenly be okay with killing some other dude's wife. But it turns out they're not law-abiding citizens.
And just because that was a lot of people.
Yeah.
How did they know the Sievers?
So I'm going to tell you that one. That Curtis, it was a childhood friend.
Okay.
With Mark.
Okay.
And that's why even though Curtis will move, actually I don't know if I don't remember where Mark was from, but Curtis and Mark grew up together. And that's why Mark was Curtis's best man 2 months before Teresa was murdered. They just lived out of state.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm tracking.
Okay. So after the two got to the Sievers house, they'd be there for a bit. Then they'd leave and head to Walmart where they were caught again on surveillance tape. Not even trying to be hidden. It's like they don't know cameras are available in 2015. But they'll buy trash bags, wet wipes, black towels, black shoes, and a lock-picking kit, which I kind of laughed at because they said the door looked like it was pried in, so I guess they thought they'd be better lock-pickers than they were.
I didn't know you could buy a lock-picking kit at Walmart.
I did not either, but I guess Florida is interesting.
Well, I thought you had to be certified as like a locksmith in order to have those tools. Otherwise, you can be charged with...
Well, maybe Florida's interesting.
Huh.
Or maybe they really bought bulk, or not bolt cutters. That wouldn't make sense for a door. I don't know. I was thinking bolt cutters.
It doesn't make sense that the door's pried open and they bought a lock-picking kit.
Well, I pictured like, let's buy a lock-picking kit. And then they're over there like, do you know how to pick a lock? Sure don't. Why'd we buy this? I don't know. Pry it open. Is the way I pictured these morons.
And they bought some bobby pins too. They stuck a few of them in there.
They probably did. It's just because Curtis had long hair. Although he didn't have any hair at all. So. But anyway, they're not going to try to be out like hidden or disguise themselves was the main point of whatever crap that they were buying. Then they head back to the Seaver home where they'd waited for her to get home. Now, obviously, they ambushed her, bludgeoned her with a hammer, and after they had killed her, they made their trek home. But not first, without finding a nice beach to catch some rays.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, naturally, once they have the car GPS, these two morons on surveillance footage, they're both going to be arrested for Dr. Sievers' murder in August 2015. Where Mark was initially super helpful and cooperative, he's going to become not so helpful.
Because he knows that these two are going to roll over on him real quick.
Well, and fortunately for the investigation, Curtis and Jimmy also took selfies on their road trip, which helped prove where they were documenting their travels. And I did a whole, I don't understand. The fellers are just like, oh, look, we're stopped here. Let's take a picture of this welcome sign for a state.
What a bunch of morons.
And in 2015, it's like they didn't even know the IDTV channel existed.
They apparently did not.
Now, mind you, after they're arrested, Jimmy's pregnant girlfriend's going to be chit-chatting with the police and be like, you know what? Jimmy confessed to me about killing Teresa.
What?
And according to her, Mark had planned to have his wife killed with the help of Curtis, which is Jimmy's friend. But Mark wasn't aware that Curtis asked Jimmy to help him. But according to Jimmy's girlfriend, Mark had wanted the life insurance money.
Well, duh. I feel like that's why they always do it.
I know. Now, after the murder, Jimmy nicknamed himself the Hammer and would brag about killing Teresa, which apparently wasn't a new thing for him. He liked to brag about things. He liked to talk about his criminal activity, although he seemed to have just been like a petty criminal. He might have just been in the clink for the little things, so he wasn't out there murdering or doing anything crazy. So it was definitely a leap of an escalation. And I personally think he should have given himself the nickname Loose Lips, because if he likes to brag about his criminal activity, the Hammer is stupid.
Yeah, that's a stupid name.
But I don't know, because he doesn't have a long list of being arrested for anything serious other than like that larceny one, which really isn't that horrific. But so I don't know if he was just also a liar or he actually did things and bragged about it, and what the motivation for that would be other than to try to prove he's this real great criminal.
It turns out the real great ones don't go around flopping their jaws about it.
But I feel like that's why when he was bragging about murdering somebody, his girlfriend was probably like tired of hearing his stories, is what I'm gonna hope for, because I would think if you were with somebody who said they murdered somebody and took it seriously, why wouldn't you come forward?
Yeah.
But she would go on and say that Jimmy also told her he was going to Florida with Curtis for work.
Was he unemployed?
He would tell his boss that he's going to Florida for a graduation. So Jimmy did like a lot of weird, odd jobs. I don't know what exactly he was doing. I know he did paint, like just odd side jobs. I would say a handyman, but it didn't seem like it was real skillful of the things that he was doing. But it just seemed like he would pick up jobs here and there. So I feel like it was probably like to go paint a house or do something. And he's like, I'm going to be gone on that weekend to go for work, which seems weird to go out of town for work to miss your work.
Yeah.
But she would also say that Jimmy, when he got back, would give her his smashed cell phone, gloves, a pair of coveralls, and tell her how he wanted her to go out to a rural road and throw him out there, which she would do. Not only would she do that, she would also take police straight to where she put him. They would recover them and find Teresa's DNA on the coveralls, as well as Jimmy's fibers from the coveralls would match those found on Teresa's dress. So,
see ya, Jimmy.
Jimmy's pretty screwed. And Jimmy's girlfriends would be like, you know what? I'll absolutely testify at trial. So apparently, she's a nice lady.
She's sick of his shit.
Yeah. Now, Mark would be eventually arrested in February of 2016 on first-degree murder charges. His two girls would be placed in the state care. I know, it was sad.
Where was his mom? If his mom was taking care of the house.
Well, by May, full custody would be given to Teresa's mother.
Oh.
I knew you were going to want to know. So, now, it's not going to take long for Curtis to be in the clink before he decides he wants to turn on his friends. So he would be more than willing to take a plea deal on second-degree murder for a 25-year sentence in order...
Somebody played with his butthole.
In order to testify against Mark and Jimmy. I still think a few years of pickle tickling in your asshole, whether it's a few more years or not, I mean, whatever.
Yeah, but that's what made him go from, I ain't saying nothing to
being a squealer.
Yeah. It turns out they tickled his tonsils.
There's no lube in prison. Oh. We went different ways with that.
Actually, I went all the way up and through.
Yeah, gross. Curtis would start squealing about how Mark offered to give him $100,000 to kill his wife. Mark even gave him the alarm code to get into the house. And when he surprised her, she tried to defend herself. But talk about a relief for Mark's mom, because you figure she was thinking her daughter-in-law got murdered and she couldn't figure out the alarm system. But it wouldn't have mattered, said or not, that somebody had the code. So I imagine that portion was probably a relief for her. I would have felt guilty.
Yeah. At the same time, she also raised the piece of shit that hired people to do this.
Well, I'm saying before,
Yeah.
when she's thinking her
Yeah,
boy.
yeah. Directly responsible.
Right. That how awful would it be that you're supposed to watch the dog, set the alarm, and when somebody gets home, they get murdered because you failed to do your security.
Yeah, that would suck.
But Jimmy would be found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison instead of being found guilty of first degree and potentially getting the death penalty, which I thought was real weird because it seems pretty plain to me.
Yeah. Well, did he get life or did he get life without parole?
He got life.
Oh.
Now, Mark would be found guilty of first-degree murder, and a unanimous decision would be made that he should get the death penalty.
Woohoo!
He has filed appeals, but they have been denied, and his conviction has been upheld. So
Good.
He's just sitting in Florida waiting for his death. And I hope it's not a case of this is 30 years in the making.
No, if it is, I hope he's got a dick in his ass and one in his mouth.
Now, when I was doing this case, I stumbled on, obviously I don't have to tell you, Curtis is a piece of shit. But apparently, a man went missing, Ronnie Bolin, in 1996, that was trying to blackmail Curtis, but no evidence could be found to connect Curtis to his death, partially because they never found a body. They just found this feller's abandoned car in a car wash parking lot with the door wide open and the keys still in there. Now, Ronnie's brother had said that his brother literally had told him that if anything happened to him, Curtis did it. The case remains unsolved, and Curtis remains the person of interest.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, Mark's stepsister believes that he would never risk losing his children and that Curtis was the one who killed Teresa on his own because he was jealous of Mark's life. That's why he started looking and dressing like Mark.
What?
Now, I did send you a picture that you can pull up what Mark and Curtis look like, and I think it's a bit of a reach. They were both bald and wore glasses. Everybody who's like, they were startlingly similar. That's the extent of it. They were white dudes that were bald and glasses.
Well, if the one dude had a full set of hair and then shaved it to look like that, I could see that maybe.
Yeah.
Which one's which? Who's in the orange?
The one with the bigger nose is... The one in the orange is Mark.
Well, Mark.
Well, it's got the family picture.
Well, Mark.
He had a goatee.
Mark is bald. Like, that dude's bald.
Yes.
And the other dude has a shaved head.
But, like, people who are like, whoa, they look a whole lot alike. I was like, I don't know.
They look like father and son. Don't they? What's the age difference between them? Do you know? I know that's not important, so it doesn't really matter, but...
And not enough for, I think, it to be father and son. But Mark would say that he was innocent, and despite the fact that when he's given a polygraph, he does fail when he's asked about his involvement.
Because he's a piece of shit. I'm a bad guesser, and I connected the dots. Guess what? There's so many other murders out there just like this one.
Well, you know what's real shitty? So I guess Teresa stayed behind during Curtis's wedding. You know, I told you Mark was the best man at his wedding 2 months before the murder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Mark goes out there, he'll have a conversation with Curtis about how, like, he wanted to leave, but he was also afraid she was going to leave him. But he didn't have money to get divorced and support himself. But he also didn't want to lose his girls. But beyond that, he'd also lose his job because he works with his wife. So I guess he did plenty of sob storying to his pal. And his pal is like, the only way I see it, she gotta die. Which I was just like, what the fuck is wrong with these men? And then Mark is like, you know what? That's a stellar idea because she's got 5 insurance policies that are like between $4 and $5 million.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. Why so much?
My guess would be because she's a doctor and they were thinking that if she keeled over, that there's really no practice for him to manage. So they would have to be sufficient, all on their own.
That's a lot of life insurance.
Well, I did track it down too, if you wanted to know, that it appears that the money was put into a trust for the girls.
That's good.
Yeah. Oh, and in case you were wondering, so Mark, once he got that insurance money, is when he would pay Curtis. But Curtis got Jimmy on board with the promise of $10,000, which I did the whole, wow, that was definitely
Sharing is
keep chunking down.
Sharing is caring, but only a little.
Mm-hmm. I was baffled by this one. Because not to say I can understand somebody wanting to kill their spouse, because I think...
Look out, Dave.
Well, I can see people's motives of they think they can't live on their own, so it seems like an easy way to start a new life by getting a payday and being done with an ex. But I think in that delusional world, those people aren't really thinking consequences through.
You think?
But I don't understand how you get two people to want to kill somebody in such a brutal way. Now, I'm sure Mark didn't specify, like, use a hammer on her. But I was just baffled that she was beaten to death by really somebody who didn't have a rage problem for her.
He was mad about something else.
Yeah, she looked like an ex. But it surprised me that you would think that it would have been a lot easier to go grab one of Mark's guns, shoot her, and leave everything.
Unless the guns were literally out on display.
Well, you figure if Mark was going to tell him about the alarm code, because, by the way, that was trackable too, so they could tell the alarm code was shut off.
Oh.
So that was part of the whole why Mark, he put the final nail in his own coffin, because he gave them an alarm code. Which is why I say, like, his mom... that had to have been a huge relief, because with how long the investigation and then the trial and all that, I find it hard to believe she didn't have any sort of guilt of if she would have set the alarm, and then to find out that she did set it. There's nothing she could have done different.
Yeah.
It's just a shame for the girls, because in a moment of greed for that feller, they essentially lost both their parents.
They did.
I'm just glad that Teresa's mom got
the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I imagine 8 and 11 would be a hard grappling with.
That's my youngest too.
Stay away from hammers.
I don't understand the taking the selfies
and the acting like they don't have a care in the world.
And then trying to lie about where they actually were.
Curtis was who they talked to first, and he did the whole, I wasn't in Florida, thinking that's all he had to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think he wasn't thinking that they could absolutely go grab the rental car, because it's not his property. They didn't pull his cell phone, any of that. Well, not that would have been helpful, because he left it at his house, which is suspicious.
Yeah, he thought he was being a genius.
The rental car is not his property to say what they can do with, so I think it's too easy to go ask and get that information, and then now they've got enough that, okay, so we can prove you were in Florida. Jimmy was the one who had his cell phone with all the selfies, and I feel like Curtis probably thought, since Mark didn't even know Jimmy was a part of it, that he was fine with Jimmy bringing his phone, because as long as nobody
could connect them, yeah.
Right. I can understand why he brought a friend along, and Curtis didn't know about all the things. And I do feel like maybe he didn't even know how they were planning to kill his wife, which is probably what led to the shock.
No, I'm going to say he practices acting.
Well, I don't know. I feel like if you talk to somebody and they were like, yeah, I'll kill your spouse for you, I wouldn't think they'd bludgeon somebody to death. I would think less messy, less evidence to clean up. Which is why I said it seems like if there were guns in the house, that would be an easy... They used a gun that was in the house and left it there, so there's no tracing it back to whose... Because it's not somebody else's gun.
I don't know. If I got to the point that I wanted to have somebody killed, I don't necessarily think I'd be...
17 smashes to the skull, Andrea.
We've been doing this for way too long, because that doesn't faze me. Like, it sucks for her, but I don't think I'd...
No, I get you're broken and it doesn't faze you, but... So the first couple hits, you're not going to spray blood everywhere.
But he didn't see it. He's not the one doing it.
After the first couple, there's blood flinging everywhere. That's why there was blood on his coveralls. That's why he had to ditch them somewhere or have his girlfriend dump them on the side of the road. Of like,
because they're sick and twisted.
If they would have shot her from across the way and she's dead, there would be no physical evidence to speak of. And then if it was the gun that was in the house... Not trying to tell people the way to commit a murder, but it's just like, I don't feel like making the biggest mess is like the best strategy.
Well,
and also,
you're just thinking about the cleanup.
Ugh.
It didn't matter anyway, because the car, they tracked it straight to the house.
Yeah, well,
So even if
he was thinking if they used Jimmy's GPS, I guess.
Hmm.
They were thinking all that one.
I don't think they were doing a lot of thinking at all.
Mm-hmm. No, but I'm glad they're all in the clank.
I was suspicious of a husband. I didn't suspect 2 more geniuses to be roped in.
I was hoping, and I did laugh when I found this one. Not because it's funny, because it's, well, the selfies are kind of funny, but because it's another case of somebody being like, hey, can you go check on so-and-so?
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, no. I feel like if anybody called me right now and just like, hey, can you go check on, no, murderer, and then hang up.
Hello, your neighbor just asked you guys to watch the cat.
That's not checking on the spouse.
No, but you're going to be...
If he decided to hang all of his cats in his living room and we walked in, it'd be like the local police wouldn't treat it as a homicide.
You don't know.
You're right. That's why I'll send Dave. But that's all I got.
Well, thanks for that.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mindfucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.